The roses needed deadheading. I could see that much from the kitchen window. The pink blooms gone papery at the edges, drooping the way things do when they've been ignored a day too long. I made a mental note to get out there after my second cup, before the July heat made it miserable. It was barely past 6, and already the light had that thick, golden quality that made everything look like a painting. I loved mornings like this. Quiet, unhurried, entirely mine. I was slicing a banana over my oatmeal when I heard the small feet on the stairs. Not rushing, not stomping the way children usually do when they want something. These were careful steps, the kind that meant she'd been awake for a while, thinking. Lily appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, the yellow ones with the little suns on them. Her hair was a soft mess around her face, and she was holding her stuffed rabbit by one ear, dragging it along the floor the way she did when something was on her mind. "Morning, baby," I said. "You're up early." She climbed onto the stool at the kitchen island without answering right away. Just watched me. 7 years old, and she already had that look her grandfather used to give me, steady and searching, like she was deciding how much to say. "Nana," she said finally, her voice low. "I heard Mommy and Daddy talking last night." I set down the spoon. "Oh?" She pulled the rabbit into her lap. "They said your house is going to belong to someone else soon." The kitchen didn't change. The light was still gold. The roses were still drooping outside. The oatmeal was still warm, but something shifted beneath all of it, the way the ground shifts before you feel the actual tremor. I kept my face easy. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She shrugged the way children do when they've delivered news they don't fully understand but know is important. "Daddy was on his phone. He said a man is coming to look at it, and Mommy said you'd be better somewhere smaller." She paused. "I don't want you somewhere smaller." I reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Did they see you listening?" She shook her head. "I was on the stairs. They were in the kitchen." "Okay." I smiled at her. The same smile I'd given 100 anxious children in 30 years of nursing. The one that says everything is fine, even when the chart says otherwise. "How about some cinnamon toast?" She nodded, and I turned back to the counter, and while I pressed bread into the toaster and shook the cinnamon sugar into a small bowl, I kept my hands moving so she wouldn't see that they wanted to stop. My daughter Sandra had been calling the house too big for 2 years. Ever since her father Harold passed, she'd taken to saying things like, "Mom, do you really need all this space? And the yard must be exhausting," as if a quarter-acre garden were a burden I hadn't chosen freely. I'd let the comments slide by. Grief makes people strange, and Sandra had always needed to feel useful, to organize, to solve. I told myself she was processing, but a man coming to look at the house. I buttered Lily's toast and cut it into triangles the way she liked and listened to her talk about the rabbit's name change. It was Clover now, not Biscuit. Very important distinction. And I thought about the deed to this house sitting in my fireproof lockbox in the bedroom closet. My name on it, only my name, because Harold and I had transferred it to my sole ownership the year before he got sick. At the advice of our estate planner, they couldn't sell it without me, but they could try. After Lily's mother Sandra arrived to pick her up that afternoon, breezing in with her oversized tote and her distracted energy, I watched her move through my kitchen the way she always did, like she was already cataloging it. She ran a finger along the counter without thinking. She glanced at the ceiling in the living room, assessing. She'd always had an eye for real estate. She was an interior designer by trade, and she knew what things were worth. "The Hendersons down the street just listed for $420," she said casually, refilling her coffee without being asked. "Wild what the market's doing." I said. She didn't mention the man. She didn't mention anything about the house. She kissed my cheek and took Lily's hand and told me they'd see me Thursday for dinner. And then she was gone, and I stood in my quiet kitchen and understood that the conversation was being planned for a different day. That evening I called Ruth. Ruth had been my next-door neighbor for 26 years. She'd held my hand in the hospital waiting room the night Harold's heart stopped. She didn't do small talk. which was one of my favorite things about her. "Start from the beginning," she said. I told her everything. Lily's words in the kitchen, Sandra's finger on the counter, the comment about the Henderson house. When I finished, Ruth was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. "She's already talked to someone," she said. "An agent or a developer? Someone? You don't bring up comparable listings by accident." "I know. What does Thomas say?" "Thomas was my son, 4 years younger than Sandra, living in Denver with his wife and working in civil engineering. We talked every Sunday. He was quieter than his sister, slower to act, but steadier. I haven't told him yet. I wanted to think first." "Don't think too long," Ruth said. "These things move fast when people decide they've already decided. I already knew what I needed to do. I'd worked in medicine long enough to understand that the window between knowing something is wrong and documenting it closes faster than people expect. I'd seen families wait too long to ask questions, and then the chart had already been written a certain way and there was nothing left to contest. I wasn't going to wait. In the morning, I called Patricia Holden. Patricia had handled Harold's estate 3 years ago. She was methodical and plain-spoken, and she never once talked down to me, which in my experience was rarer than it should be. Her assistant put me through within the hour. I told her what Lily had heard. I told her about Sandra's comments. I told her I wanted to know exactly where I stood and what to do about it. "Your deed is in your name only?" she asked. "Sole ownership." "Has been since 2019. "Good. They can't list it without your signature on a listing agreement. What you want to watch for is any attempt to establish legal authority over you, power of attorney, conservatorship, anything that would allow them to act on your behalf. Sandra hasn't mentioned any of that." "Not yet," Patricia said. "But if they believe the house is the obstacle, removing the obstacle means removing your control over it. Stay alert. And Eleanor, if a family meeting gets proposed, you call me before you attend." I wrote that down even though I wouldn't forget it. The dinner invitation came on a Wednesday. Sandra texted, which I'd noticed she did more often now when she wanted something easier to manage than a phone call. "Mom, how about Sunday lunch at our place?" "Just family. Derek's been asking about you and Lily wants to show you her new art project." Then a smiley face. Then a heart. I replied that I'd be delighted. I called Thomas that night instead of Sunday. He answered on the second ring, surprised. "Mom, everything okay?" I told him what I'd told Ruth. And then I told him about Patricia. And then I was quiet and let him absorb it. He was quiet for a longer time than I expected. "I knew something was off," he said finally. "What do you mean?" "Sandra called me 2 weeks ago. Said she was worried about you. That you'd been forgetting things, seemed confused sometimes." A pause. I told her I hadn't noticed anything like that when we talked. She said maybe I wasn't around enough to see it. The line went still between us. I'd set my coffee down without realizing it. "I haven't been forgetting things, Thomas." "I know, Mom. I know." His voice was careful, the way it got when he was working something out. "I think I see what this is now. Are you coming Sunday?" Another pause. Longer this time. I wasn't invited. Of course he wasn't. "Come anyway," I said. He booked a flight that night. Sandra's house was 40 minutes from mine in a newer development where all the homes had 3-car garages and landscaping that looked professional because she'd decorated it beautifully. I'd always given her that. Everything coordinated. Nothing accidental. When I arrived on Sunday, she was in the kitchen arranging a cheese board with the focused care of someone who wanted you to notice the effort. Derek was at the grill. He waved from the patio, easy and warm, the way he always was in social situations. Derek sold commercial real estate. He was good at the smile that preceded the ask. Lily ran to me at the door and pulled me toward her bedroom to show me a watercolor painting she'd done in art camp, a purple horse with orange wings. I told her it was magnificent and she beamed, and I held her hand a little longer than usual walking back down the hall. Thomas arrived 45 minutes into lunch. Sandra went still when she heard the doorbell. Just for a moment. just the small freezing of a person whose script has been interrupted. Then she recovered, crossed to the door, and I watched her face arrange itself into a welcome that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Tommy, I didn't know you were coming." "Surprised myself," he said, and hugged her, and then came to the table and sat beside me, and I felt something settle in my chest. We made it through the meal talking about nothing in particular, Lily chattered. Derek talked about a property development in Phoenix. Sandra refilled glasses and laughed at the right moments. I ate and listened and kept my expression open and mild. And I thought about the small device in my cardigan pocket, the one Ruth had shown me how to use. The voice memo application already recording. It was Sandra who brought it up, over dessert. She set her fork down with deliberate lightness. "Mom, there's something Derek and I have been wanting to talk to you about." She glanced at Thomas, recalibrating. "Both of you, actually. We've been thinking about what's best for you going forward." "I appreciate that," I said. "The house is a lot to maintain. We know you love it, but the yard, the upkeep, it's a lot for one person." She reached into the bag hanging from her chair and produced a brochure. She laid it on the table between us with both hands. "The way you present something, you've already decided. This community opened last year in Clearwater. Active senior living. It's beautiful, honestly. Some of the units have private patios. There's a pool, organized activities. You want me to move?" I said pleasantly. "We want you to be safe and happy." She leaned forward. "And honestly, the proceeds from your house, the market, is extraordinary right now. Mom, you could have complete financial security. You'd never have to worry. The house is paid off," I said. "I don't worry now." Derek stepped in, his tone measured and reasonable, the voice he used to close. "Eleanor, we've also been in touch with your doctor's office, just to ask some general questions. Understand the landscape, doctor. Reeves mentioned that memory changes are common at your stage and that it's wise to have support structures in place." "You contacted my doctor?" I set my own fork down. "Just a general inquiry." "Without asking me." Thomas spoke from beside me. "What exactly did you say to them?" Sandra's eyes moved to him with an expression I recognized from her childhood. The look she got when she hadn't expected pushback. "We expressed concern. That's all." "As family, you expressed concern to her physician," Thomas said slowly, "without telling her you were doing it. We were trying to help, by laying a foundation," he said, "for a competency argument." The patio went quiet, except for the distant sound of a neighbor's lawnmower. Lily had stopped eating. She was looking at her mother, and then at me with the solemn focus of a child who understands more than adults give her credit for. I gave her a small smile, and she looked down at her plate. Sandra's voice shifted, just slightly, losing some of its warm management. "Thomas, you don't live here. You don't see how she's doing day to day. She sounds fine to me every Sunday when we talk. Because she's careful. Because she doesn't want to worry you, Sandra." My voice was quiet and even, and she stopped. "I'm sitting right here." The silence that followed was the kind that doesn't recover easily. I folded my napkin and set it beside my plate. "I appreciate that you love me," I said. "I believe you do, in your way. But I am not confused. I am not declining. And I am not selling my home." I picked up the brochure between two fingers and set it beside Sandra's dessert plate. "I'd like to take Lily for some ice cream now, if that's all right." Sandra said nothing. I pushed my chair back and Lily scrambled off hers and took my hand without being asked. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat with her head against the door. The purple horse drawing rolled in her lap. I watched her in the mirror and thought about the recording in my pocket and what Patricia would say when she heard it. Thomas followed me home in his rental car. We sat on the back porch until nearly 10, talking. The fireflies starting up in the garden as the sky went dark. He was angry in the quiet way he'd always expressed anger, still and compressed. I was something steadier, something that felt like resolve. "She's going to keep pushing," he said. "I know. She'll go to the doctor again. She'll document things that didn't happen." I know that too. I looked out at Harold's garden, the rose canes, black shapes in the dusk. That's why I've already been to Patricia. He turned to look at me. When? The week Lily told me about the man coming to look at the house. A pause. Then, slowly, he smiled. You were ahead of them the whole time. I had been. Not out of coldness, I want to be clear about that, because there are people who will hear this story and think it required some hardness I'm not sure I have. What it required was clarity. I'd spent 30 years in nursing, and I'd learned that care without attention is just performance. And I had been attending, very carefully, to what was happening around me. That night I sat with Patricia by phone and played her the recording. She listened without interrupting. When it ended, she said, "The contact with your physician is the most significant element. That's a deliberate attempt to build a narrative about your cognitive state. We need to get ahead of it." We scheduled an appointment with a neurologist for the following week. My choice? My referral? No input from Sandra? Full cognitive evaluation. Dr. Claire Merritt had been recommended by a colleague of Ruth's, a physician who treated her like an adult and explained everything twice if she asked. The results were what I already knew. My memory was intact. My processing was sharp. Dr. Merritt noted in the report, with the particular specificity of someone who understood why it might matter later, that there were no clinical findings consistent with cognitive impairment of any kind. I made several copies of that report. One went to Patricia. One went into my lockbox. One I mailed to Thomas in Denver. One I filed in a separate folder I labeled simply, "For the record." 2 weeks later, Sandra called. She was warmer than she'd been at lunch, softer, the version of herself she used when she wanted to reopen a door she'd closed badly. She said she was sorry if the conversation had felt rushed. She said she only wanted what was best for me. She said Derek felt terrible about how it had come across. I listened. I said very little. I did not tell her about Dr. Merritt. Then she said, "Mom, we've actually been in contact with a real estate attorney. Just to understand your options. We thought maybe if you saw what the property was actually worth right now, it might feel different." A real estate attorney, I repeated. Just exploratory, Sandra. I kept my voice gentle. I'd like you to hear something. I played her 30 seconds of the Sunday lunch recording over the phone. Just Derek's voice. Once she signs over access, it'll make things so much easier. The words unmistakable. The context clear. The silence on her end was long. That was a private conversation, she said finally. In my presence, I said. About my property. Another silence. I'm not angry, I told her. And I meant it. Mostly. But I need you to understand where things stand. This house is mine. The decision about what happens to it belongs to me alone. If that ever comes to a legal question, I have documentation. I let that sit for a moment. I love you. I love Lily. I want us to find a way through this that doesn't break everything. But I will not be managed. She hung up without saying goodbye. I set the phone on the counter and stood in the kitchen for a while, looking out at the garden. The roses were in better shape now. I'd gotten to them finally. They looked like themselves again. The call from Sandra's attorney came 3 weeks later, not about the house. They'd pivoted when they found the legal footing on the property was solid. They'd changed approach. The letter cited concerns about my ability to manage my own financial affairs. It requested a formal competency evaluation under court supervision. It was signed by a family law attorney in Tampa named Garrett Wills, and it listed Sandra and Derek as petitioners. I read it once, set it on the kitchen table, and called Patricia. We were expecting something like this, Patricia said. Not exactly this, but this direction. Here's what we're going to do. We responded within the week. Patricia filed a formal response, including the neurological evaluation from Dr. Merritt, the financial records showing my accounts managed consistently and responsibly for the past 4 years, the documentation of every asset I owned, every bill paid on time, every property tax current, every insurance policy active. She included a letter from my former supervisor at the hospital, a woman I'd worked beside for 22 years, attesting to my character and cognition. She included letters from Ruth and from 2 other neighbors who'd known me for decades. She also included a transcript of the Sunday lunch recording. The note attached to Derek's section was clinical and precise. Petitioner's spouse can be heard stating, quote, "Once she signs over access, it'll make things so much easier," in direct reference to the subject's financial accounts. This statement, in context, suggests the petition's motivations may be financial rather than protective in nature. I did not attend the preliminary hearing. Patricia did. She called me afterward. The judge asked them some very specific questions about the basis for the petition. She said, "Their attorney looked unprepared for the cognitive evaluation results. I think they expected you not to have one." "I know," I said. "They'll likely withdraw before it goes further. It would cost them more to proceed than they'd gain." She was right. The withdrawal came 8 days later. I sat with the paperwork in Harold's old chair in the living room, the one I kept even though it didn't match anything else, because he'd spent 10,000 evenings in it and the shape of him was still there somehow. I thought about what I felt and tried to be honest with myself about it. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired and sad, and also, underneath all of that, something that was not quite relief but close to it. A settling, the kind that happens when you've been bracing against something for a long time and the thing finally stops pushing. Thomas called as soon as Patricia reached him. "It's over," he said. "For now," I said. "Mom, I'm all right, I promise." I heard him exhale. "I'm going to come out more often." I should have been. "You did exactly what I needed when I needed it," I told him. "Don't rewrite that." He was quiet for a moment. "You were so calm through all of it." How? I thought about Harold. About 30 years of watching people face the worst moments of their lives in hospital rooms and doing what needed doing anyway. I thought about Lily on the stairs in the dark, carrying information she was too young to carry, pressing it into my hands the only way she knew how. "Someone needed me to be," I said. Sandra called once, 2 months later. She didn't apologize. Not exactly. She said she'd been scared. She said she'd convinced herself she was protecting me. She said Derek had pushed harder than she should have let him. And she'd known it and gone along with it, and she wasn't proud of that. I listened. I didn't forgive her on the phone. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. It's a long hallway. But I told her I wasn't closed to talking, and I told her that Lily was always welcome, and I meant both things. She cried a little. I let her. That fall, I had the back garden replanted. Not changed, really. Just refreshed new mulch, divided perennials. A climbing rose on the fence that Harold had always wanted to try but never gotten around to. Thomas flew in for the weekend and helped me dig. He's better with plants than he thinks he is. He has his father's patience. Lily came with Sandra at Thanksgiving. It was tentative between us all, careful. We kept to safe subjects. Lily showed me a new drawing, a house this time, with a pink door and a garden. She'd labeled it in careful crayon letters, Nana's house. And when she gave it to me, she said, "So, you remember what it looks like?" I pressed it to my chest and held her for a long time. That night after they left, I pinned the drawing to the corkboard in my kitchen, next to the grocery list and the phone number for the garden center, and a photograph of Harold in the backyard the summer before he got sick, squinting into the sun, proud of the roses he'd just planted. I look at it every morning when I make my coffee. This house is mine. The deed is in my name. The lockbox is in my closet, and the records are in order, and I know exactly what I have and exactly who I am. I am 71 years old, and I deadhead my own roses and I manage my own accounts. And some mornings I sit on the back porch with my second cup, and I feel so entirely like myself that I have to stop and notice it, the way you notice. A good thing that used to be ordinary. My name is Eleanor. I raised 2 children and nursed 1,000 strangers and loved one man for 41 years and lost him too soon. I am not a burden to be managed or a problem to be solved or a resource to be reallocated. I am a person in the middle of my own story, still writing it. And when my granddaughter wraps her arms around my neck and says, "Nana, you're the best person," I don't deflect it the way I used to. I just hold her and say, "I know, baby. I know," because I do.